friends. Am I audible back? And welcome to Kotak Alts. There are times when different alphabets get more and more important. The most important alphabet today is the letter T. It stands, of course, for Trump. It stands for tariff. It stands for turbulence. But it also stands for thrive. And therefore, we have to ask the question that as we look at the world today, through the prism of a pretty shifting sands of the global reality, in the midst of Trump, tariff, and turbulence, how do we thrive in this chaos? They say fortunes are made and lost at turning points of history. And we are probably in one such juncture. And therefore, we have to look at the world from a different perspective. Many say that we are now in the middle of a world which is the world order prevailing what was pre-World War II, which is each country was for itself. There was no concept of WTO, United Nations, no global organizations, no institutions, and you ate what you killed. That was the rule of the world. The question we have to ask is, are we effectively moving back there? And this is the seismic change which we may be going through as we sit here, as we gather here today. And probably the timing for a conference like this could not have been better. If you look at, of course, the first few weeks of the Trump era and the response of different nations, it is quite fascinating. The most interesting response I see as we speak is that of the disunited nations of Europe. They're finally trying their best to get together in the new era. Europe had unmatched prosperity post-World War II till recently, when it started to see its growth stagnate, and they moved to a post-development world where social issues around sustainability, of course they are important, but they completely dominated some of the basics of what made countries, nations, continents in the world tick. Essentially, Europe played a very simple game. It was a mercantilist game, which is we are in the business of growing our economy and getting to scale and size, exporting our way, and the cost of protection and the umbrella of protection shall be the United States of America. That myth is finally broken. One of the countries which got devastated in World War II was Germany. And since then, I think Germany post that saw inflation of hundreds of percentage points of inflation in that period. And the German government and the parliament passed a law which brutally controlled fiscal deficit of Germany. It became extremely narrow in its approach that it shall never overspend its way. And it maintained this discipline of fiscal prudence. I would say to a Brahminical sense of prudence. And basically protected themselves on the strength of their fisc from 1947, 48 or around then, all the way till 2025. They have just announced $800 billion of spend, Germany alone, which they will spend on defense and infrastructure. So this is going to change. This is going to be a dramatic change which Europe is bringing in. For some of you who are very short-term observers of currencies, the euro appreciated 4 percentage points in the last 2 days of last week, in 2 days, on the back of significant fiscal spend which is going to happen, and the German Bund yields shot up sharply because you're going to borrow so much more for your balance sheet as a country. So the whole seismic tectonic change is happening, and Europe is going to spend like crazy to make itself independent of America. On the other hand, never underestimate China. It has demonstrated its ability to go out there and be one of the most efficient producers on everything from technology to manufacturing. And it is this power, friends, that we have to keep in mind, that China could be a potential long-term beneficiary of the current situation in US over the next 5 to 10 years. So this is another tectonic shift which we are in the middle of. And then, of course, we are now seeing a lot of other countries reassessing their contours, including Japan and South Korea. They too were in an American umbrella of support. They too will have to start thinking about how they will spend money on defense. Therefore, based on every data I am seeing, friends, one thing is clear. Power is power. And the world is going to see massive defense spending. Therefore, everything connected with defense is going to be from drones to everything else. And I think it's electronic intelligence which will get much more important as well. For investors, the next big opportunity, at least as I see it in apparent common sense, is the world of defense. But the world of defense is more complicated. And the reason for this complication is, if you're spending money on defense by buying equipment from another country, who is your current ally, and based on a Twitter feed next morning, you have to change your allies, what happens to your defense resilience? And therefore, in the Indian context, if there's one thing I would strongly believe India needs to do at a massive pace is, one, increase defense spending as a percentage of our total GDP, and two, make in India. Both these are critical priorities for any nation, including India. So that's one very clear outcome of this changed world. The other very important outcome of this changed, uncertain world is have strong balance sheets as a country. Because in this turbulence, you don't know what will hit you when. Therefore, whether you are a company, a bank, a financial services company, or a country, please have very strong balance sheets. Because that's what will enable you to withstand the shocks which will inevitably come over the next few years. And it is here that I do believe India, on a fundamental basis, is in a reasonable position. Our current account deficit is not very large. It's about $50 billion a year. But friends, I have to highlight to you, the $50 billion current account deficit is net of the trade surplus which India runs with US of $40 billion. If Mr. Trump wants to reduce this, there will be some direct and indirect pressure on India's current account deficit. And the other fact and the reality is India's current account deficit with China on a net basis, which is $80 billion. Therefore, despite everything, the country's competitiveness and efficiency is not at a point where we can say suddenly we will stop Chinese imports. It's $80 billion of net deficit with China. We still buy so much more from China than we are able to sell. And both these paradigms are the reality for us in our net current account deficit, which is $50 billion. And it is quite interesting that most investors around the world have, in the Trump tariff world, have begun to focus on trade current account deficit numbers much more than they did in the past. And in that context, therefore, India has a relatively low current account deficit. India has made great moves in our fiscal deficit. We have been more conscious, more conservative. Our fiscal deficit is down to 4.8%, with a path which goes down further to 4.4 next year, and hopefully around 4 or below in the years to come. So conservatism pays, and on that I would really credit the Indian policy makers for keeping India's balance sheet and P&L in reasonably good shape. However, India has a separate challenge, which I think India had this challenge for a long time, which was a challenge around the fact that our dependence on foreign equity had been very high from 1995 over the years. And therefore, like a mountain, which is the stock of foreign portfolio investment even today is 800 billion. The stock of foreign direct investment, which is all repatriable, is another 900 billion. And external commercial borrowings is give or take another 700 billion. So you've got close to 2.5 trillion of capital repatriable stock of foreign savings even today in India. And these savings are focused on fundamental valuation. They are not dependent on mood swings. And in a world where US dollar interest rates have moved up, the post-Trump world saw a strengthening of the US currency, and every country unto itself, we have seen reasonably strong outflows both in FPI and even more importantly, which most of you may not be focusing on, which is FDI. Car manufacturing companies, asset management companies with foreign shareholding, US strategic investors, private equity, which classifies as FDI, have all been consistently selling over the last 1 year. Just to give you the statistic, at the peak, India got something like $20 or $25 billion of net FDI in a year. In 23-24, April to December, to give you comparable periods, India got only $10 billion. And in 24-25, April to December, the net FDI into India is $1.2 billion. And probably by the end of the year, we may be close to neutral for full year, April to March 25. And in a country where we have $50 billion of current account deficit and FPI selling, the choice for the country is either to keep on reducing its reserves or letting the currency find its level. Some of you may have felt good about the US dollar versus rupee stabilizing over last 1 week. What you may be forgetting is that the US dollar has weakened against the euro by 4%. And with the rupee, it is more or less stable. Therefore, please look at the currency baskets, not just individual currencies. But therefore, my view is the Indian trend on I think India's macroeconomic numbers are good. The challenge for India is two things. One is uncertainty and discontinuity in the Trump world, and two is valuations. I do believe India's story is fundamentally sound. Therefore, at the right valuations, India will reach an ability to attract foreign savings. And what is at this stage is a critical point, whether we have reached that point or there is some ways to go. And I'm sure through the day in this conference, you'll be able to figure it out, whether valuations need more corrections to get to more fundamentally attractive valuations, or we have some ways to go. Are Indian markets still valued both public and private? Are the prices reflecting the fundamentals of valuation in our economy? We have seen some correction in the last 4 or 5 months, but is that enough? I will not answer that question. I would leave it to the rest of you during the day to figure out whether there is some more to go. And I would not long-term panic about the India story. We are in reasonable shape. We can manage the vicissitudes coming in the post-Trump world. We have had reasonable foreign affairs strategic positioning. And I feel fundamentally that India is in a reasonable place in the context of our uncertain world. But where asset values are, and with the mountain of $2.4 trillion, which is capital repatriable, whether we need to reach a more sustainable level of value before markets and different assets begin to recover from there. And the fact of the matter is, most private bankers in this room 1 year ago would have advised you to put money into Indian assets versus China. The fact of the matter is, Chinese assets have given much better returns. So never, never, never say never, especially with a strong second largest economy in the world called China. And watch out for the US. US has a great ability of coming back. The best performing markets in the world for a long time have been the US markets. They are 70% of the world market capitalization with just 26% of the world GDP. But times can change. And US exceptionalism is being now looked at with a much closer microscopic lens than ever before. With that, I will now open up for a few minutes of Q&A, and happy to answer any question any of you may have. Thank you very much. Any questions? Or everyone's feeling great about their portfolios and investments which are all flying? Anyone wants to ask a question, please feel free. Yeah. No.
Yes, sir. I wanted to ask, sir, what's your view on cryptocurrencies and gold as an alternate to USD?
You know, maybe this is very old-fashioned. When I grew up and as I was building our firm, I had one very simple principle. If I do not understand something, I'm better to be stupid now than sorry later. So, I do not understand crypto. But I do understand gold a little better, because we have been used to it intergenerationally. Both create no value. But there are more individuals around the planet who feel attachment to gold, and crypto is still a new phenomenon. Therefore, left to me, gold over crypto any day. Yeah.
So what is your view on like blockchain or whatever, we are talking about decentralization, and we are talking about centralization, which is called digital currency, where the RBI, which is, want to come out with digital currency. What is your view on that, when it will see light at the end of the day?
It has already seen light, whether it will see sunlight. So I will watch it. I don't want to be the big guy thumping the table for this. I still believe that it has to be tested, it has to work. What does it do? What are the attributes to it? What does it do to different markets? And therefore, I think it's still very early days. Yeah.
Tariff and turbulence. What do you think AI, the new, terminology we are using every day, we keep hearing, how do you think it's going to play out in the global economy?
I think AI is going to be game-changing. But since we are looking at it from the returns and the investment point of view, I just want to give you two examples of history. When electricity was first invented, it was a game-changing moment for the world. We will all agree to that. It changed the way we live. No doubt about that. And there was a mad rush of investors in those days to invest in power generation and distribution companies when it first got invented. And a whole host of entrepreneurs, promoters, versions of family offices in those days, everybody piled on to investing in this new game-changing reality for the world called electricity. Electricity has changed the world. All those first generation companies have died. So I'm making a difference between game-changing patterns of AI versus sustainability and resilience calls of AI business models of companies. Second example, more recent in our history, is the example of the internet. And we saw it late 80s, early 90s, and we saw a huge boom on internet companies in the year 99, 2000 globally. Everywhere in the world, including India. When we sit here 25 years later, it's a game-changing thing of what happened in the internet. But I think most of those companies, not all, most of those companies died. Amongst the few companies which survived, probably I can think about Amazon and maybe a few others. But most of the companies which were founded in the 90s to 2000s for taking advantage of the dramatic change to the world because of the net. The dramatic change to the world happened. You have to be very clear and careful. You have two approaches. Either you spray and pray, or you think you are having a rifle and you think you have identified that one company which will make the difference. But either way is good luck to you.
Sorry, we'll take questions later on. We're running a bit late. Sorry about that. Can we move on to the next thing? Yeah. Mr. Kotak, if you could just stay back for the report launch. May I request Srini, Ishwar, Lakshmi, Dheeraj, and Ashish to join Uday on stage to launch the white paper on life sciences industry in India. This report highlights India's remarkable ingenuity and pioneering advancements in the life sciences sector. Kotak Alts has always embraced innovation and has supported several companies in the life sciences space. And we are proud to present this report, authored by CRISIL for Kotak.